More on the president's tariff announcement in China. China's response. Let's bring in Leland Miller, CEO of China Beige Book International. The president, here's what he said. He said the deal that they almost came to, there were 30 things that they just reneged on. They also said they were going to start buying grain immediately and other agricultural products. Haven't bought any. He also got a promise for fentanyl, that President Xi was going to do something for fentanyl. I don't know whether it's true. President Trump said there's been no progress in that area either. It's still flooding in and people are dying. Is it possible that all along, and we've seen this for quite a while, you're a China expert, 20, 25 years, they'll nod and say, oh, yeah, we'll do these things when they have no intention, perhaps, of doing any of these things, and they're on a mission to get where they want to get by 2025, and by hook or crook, they're gonna get there. I mean, and is that what's happening here?
Well, look, if the Chinese would love nothing more than to talk and do nothing. But I think there's another dynamic at play as well. If you have a timeline that's not rushed, and so the Chinese don't actually see a deadline.
Elections, President Xi's fine.
Nothing coming. Well, you don't have any politics on the Chinese side from that perspective, but you also don't have a deadline to end the talks. They didn't think there was a new tariff deadline hitting, which meant that you're about to take a multi-month hiatus off from the talks anyways because of the Chinese holiday around the PRC anniversary in August, so in October. So they were never going to do anything intense in September or October anyways because of how politically sensitive that holiday is. So the Chinese looked at this and said, look, we're not going to get into the hard negotiations, even if there is a deal, until November, December. Why are we talking about the text right now? Let's do some ag buys to buy off the president. Let's get some concessions on Huawei, and then maybe, depending on what happens.
So what did he say? I'm not going to do it. He saw that move and for what it was, and said, okay, then take another 10% on another $300 billion.
Yeah, I think the Chinese didn't play the game very well. I mean, look, instead of having some sort of pretend move towards, okay, we're moving forward, the Chinese sat down. They didn't want to talk about anything except agricultural buys in Huawei. There's no acknowledgement that you're going back to the old text. I think Lighthizer returned from the meetings and said, this is just absolute propaganda.
Yeah, we just looked at the pictures of them all standing together, Lighthizer, Mnuchin, and the Chinese trade representative who was with them. And it basically looked like all of them thinking, okay, how am I going back and reporting this? Because I got
Don't you think, Leland, though, that if you're going to play the long game against China, you're going to lose, maybe? We have much more.
Threshold for pain is the.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah. I think their economy can get hurt more than us, but I think they're still. I think that in general they're ready to play the long game more, and we definitely have short-term considerations over here.
No question, and that's been the problem from the beginning. But there's a new deputy sheriff in town, and his name is the Fed, and the Fed, by Jay Powell's own explicit words, has backstopped President Trump's trade agenda. Now, you can argue this is a good thing or a bad thing, but what he's essentially done is told the president that if you make things bad enough, we're going to step in and back you going forward. And so this has completely changed the president's trajectory in terms of how much brinksmanship he can afford.
So you don't think it's a coincidence that this happened a day after the Fed, after Chairman Powell spoke?
Absolutely not. So if you would have had a 50 basis point cut this week.
You think you would have gone even harder?
I think he would have done it at all. I think he would have had the market go up. I think this would have been delayed more.
I think Trump.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I think I don't understand that calculus.
These guys came back and told him. I think he got really PO'd when Lighthizer, because it was after 11:30 yesterday, and it seems like it was kind of impulsive, right? I mean, they met Lighthizer and Mnuchin, and I think they delivered.
Although I have to say the tweet was uncharacteristically muted in terms of what he was saying. You saw
Mnuchin wanted to say, we need to alert the Chinese that we're going to do this.
Right.
And Trump said, no, we're just going to come out and do it. But he did. The olive branch was there, and they aren't in yet.
Right.
I mean, he may not put these on if
China comes
behavior that
it seems like he laid out a path for China to avoid this by saying, start buying some of these agricultural goods immediately, do something on fentanyl, and then we can all maybe save face and say that we're continuing these conversations.
Yeah, look, the talks were not constructive. At the same time, the Fed was not listening to the president. And when the Fed reacted the way it did, the markets reacted the way they did to a Fed announcement that they didn't like, the president was happy to just lay it on. Let's get a bigger market hit, and then I'm going to get my 50 basis points cut in September.
Can you just explain this election piece of it, which is you have Eunice on one side, and not Eunice, but the Beijing view, which is just let this roll through the election, and Trump also seems to think that he should let this roll through the election. Who is right?
Well, I think that.
And why do they both think the same? I mean, it's a very strange situation.
It is, and it's different from a few months ago. So the Chinese economy has strengthened quite considerably since the end of 2018. 2018 was a mess, and they've spent a lot of time and effort and resources to build it back up. What I think President Trump is looking at right now is he's looking at the Democratic field, and he's saying to himself that if I'm going against Sanders or Warren or one of these protectionists, then I have to be the arch protectionist on that stage. I can't get outflanked. So I think he's trying to position himself in a way where he has flexibility on a deal if Joe Biden's the candidate. But if it's not, and he's got Sanders or Warren or someone like that.
We've had people come here and say, if this deal happens after the election and Trump is still in office, it's actually worse for China. You think that's right or wrong?
I think that this thing gets stretched down the road. The president doesn't need the ag buys. So I guess the need for the president to demand big purchases before an election go away. So there is probably a need for more substance. But look, structural reform wasn't on the table now. It wasn't on the table before. It won't be on the table in the future. So this goes to the question, what do they actually want from a trade deal? If the president is happy with getting agricultural purchases and a push back against the trade deficit in the short term, he can get himself a deal. If he thinks that he's changing Chinese behavior on SOEs, this is not going to happen. So I think the president has to think about what his goals are.